Hey, welcome back to another week of growth groups. And this week we are launching our double youth room reservations. So for the first half hour and the last half hour of youth group, you can reserve the youth room and make sure that you use just the items in the appropriate bin. So for the first half hour, there's bin 1. For the second half hour, there's bin 2. Make sure you clean up and put your stuff back in those bins before you leave so that everything is good and COVID clean. Make sure that you're wearing your masks, that you're hand sanitizing and everything as COVID continues to spread and more schools are going from hybrid to full remote. We want to be responsible and careful here at the church and make sure that you're social distancing as much as possible, that you're hand sanitizing, wear those masks. We need your cooperation to be able to continue meeting in person. Otherwise, we might get shut down and have to have completely Zoom-driven growth groups, and that would, not be ideal. So help us out and keep following the rules. You guys are awesome. As we lean into Bible study this week, we are looking at John chapter 2, which has two pretty distinct stories in it. The first part of John 2 tells us about Jesus' first miracle at a wedding. And the second part of John 2 talks about when Jesus drove out the money changers in the temple. And these might seem pretty unrelated, but it's kind of tied in together at the close. So I want to give you just a little bit of historical background before you dig into the passage. So for the weddings in ancient Near Eastern cultures were a week-long festival so that those who had traveled away, who had moved away, can come home and celebrate with their family and with their clan, because family was a really big deal. And we have good reason to believe that this wedding was for one of Jesus's family members, which is why when the wine runs out a few days into the party, which would have been a huge embarrassment and it would have brought shame on the family, why Jesus's mother, Mary, comes to him and says, "Jesus, the wine ran out, help us." And so Jesus figured it out and he did a miracle. But it wasn't this whole big thing where he drew attention to himself. Only a few people knew what he had done. And then it says a few days later, he was in the temple. And on the outer court of the temple in Jerusalem, that was the only place where non-Jewish people, known as Gentiles, that was the only place where Gentiles could come and worship the Lord. But instead of having a place where these Gentiles could come and seek the Lord and they would be ministered to, and there would be people there to lead them in worship to the Lord. Instead, they had installed tables and booths and stores where pilgrims who had traveled a long way to get to Jerusalem could buy the sacrificial animals they needed to make the sacrifices when they entered into the inner courts of the temple. Instead, Jesus said, no, like those stores don't belong here. What belongs here are people from all tribes and nations around the world who would come here to worship God. Like, this is a house of prayer, not just for Israel, but for all nations. And so Jesus got really ticked off and he got angry in the completely appropriate way. And he drove out the people who were crowding out those who were seeking God. And then at the end, everyone's all interested in, like, who is this guy? I heard rumors that he performed this miracle with wine, and that seems pretty cool. And then he, pushed out the money changers and got really angry, and that seems kind of cool, and I'm going to follow him. And then the passage closes out in John 2:24 and 25, saying that Jesus didn't entrust himself to men because he knew what was in their heart. He knew that these people were just interested in a show. They weren't interested in being actual disciples. They weren't interested in learning and in growing and in worshiping the Lord. They were interested in the entertainment factor. And so Jesus didn't entrust himself to them. And so we see all these foreshadowings of what type of teacher and Messiah Jesus is, what type of leader he is, and what type of person who he's interested in reaching out to. He's interested in reaching out to the Gentiles who felt like they weren't welcomed, not just to the people who are interested in the attraction and in the excitement and entertainment of someone who is kind of stirring up a little bit of trouble. And so as you study in John chapter 2, take a look at some key words and some key themes that are going to be following throughout the rest of the Gospel of John. So I hope that you have a great night, and thanks again for being here. Keep wearing your masks, keep doing all the awesome things, and we'll see you next week.